It's the end of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends. Well, folks, if you look at that gigantic, sharp, interactive board, it's none other than Chris Polek. I had the great pleasure to attend Chris's 50th business anniversary in New Jersey last week. What an awesome event that was. I got to meet Chris's family. There was some other folks from the media there, but at the end of the day, it was a fantastic celebration, and 50 years is a great, great milestone. I wanted to bring Chris on today because there's a lot of folks in our industry that are going through what Chris went through. Generational change taking over the family business. And Chris, I thought it would be a great conversation to talk about some of this stuff because there's a lot of folks in our industry that are in the second generation, third, hell, there might even be some fourth generation folks. And I know
there's some 4 and 5, I think.
yeah.
So there are some companies that are over the 100-year mark, so you know that they've had more than that.
5. Otherwise, I said, well, we do have a lot of old people in the industry too. But I will tell you, Chris, it has to be tough. I think a lot of people think, oh, yeah, he just inherited the business. Anybody can work for their dad. But quite honestly, I think it's probably harder to work for your dad or your mom than it is to work for a leader and become the president through organic growth. But at the end of the day, family businesses aren't some cookie cutter thing that someone can just walk into. There has to be some changes, some dynamics, and I want to talk about that. So the first question I want to ask you, you're taking over the company. But Chris, when did Polek and Polek become your dream? Because your dad started the company and it was your dad's dream. You were about 10 years old when your dad started the company. So when did Chris get the dream to want to be the entrepreneur, the head person at Polek and Polek?
Well, I would say that part of it even started out when I was 10 years old, as I remember when my dad wrote me a letter telling me about him starting this business, and I was excited by that. I thought it was such a cool thing to have a company with your family name on it. That was really cool. So there was always a part of the dream a little bit from the beginning, and I always helped out in the business or worked over the summers growing up. But I'd say once I got passed out of the child labor violation law rule years, and became a full-time employee, 14 years after he started the company in 1988. That's where I started to, really be focused on learning more of the business. Before becoming a full-time employee, I actually had the opportunity of working in many different areas of the business, whether it was in sales or accounting or, in the warehouse. Learned a lot of different things of how to run a company. And I would say that especially with family business members or family business leaders that have family members in the business that they want to groom and go through that it's important to expose them as many different areas of the business as possible. And you may be surprised what you find out. There might be a particular area that they're really passionate about and can make big changes.
Speaking of big changes, so you're taking the helm, you're getting ready to take the helm. When was the first time you had a real conflict with your dad? Like you're going through the transition and it's like, okay, it's time to have a conversation with dad. I mean, when did that happen and what was that about?
Almost right from the beginning. Yeah, when I first came in working the 1 year, he brought me in to handle working with the manufacturers in Japan and doing the purchasing because he had someone leave. He wanted me to take over that part of the business. And, there's a time difference in Japan and everything. So, he was very concerned one day about if we were going to get all these things organized together on time. And I walked into the office early one morning at 7:30, and there he was sitting at my desk going through my work, making sure that we were prepared. And I had to tell him, hey, you hired me to do this. It's 7:30 in the morning. It's 7:30 in the morning. That means Japan is closed. So we've got the entire day to work on this. I said, there's no reason that it has to be done right now, because we take the time and get it done right later, and we send it over later. So I kind of made that clear from the beginning because it's important it's important for people to have their roles and focus on what they're getting done. As I told them, if I'm not getting the job done, then that's a different conversation that we have to have. But this is going to get done today in the time frame that it needs to get done.
I think your dad probably at that moment probably got more level of respect for you. Maybe he's starting to realize now that maybe Chris is ready to really take charge, because I think a lot of times the second generations, they're afraid to make the challenge, and especially if it's your parent. I mean, it's a little bit harder, but they really need to do that. And would you recommend that they do that, no matter what they think that they shouldn't?
Yeah, I mean, you got to stand up for yourself to set boundaries, and hopefully what you said as far as my father respecting that more, hopefully he did believe that. Yeah. Maybe he did think it. I know he certainly didn't say it right then and there, but that was kind of more of a generational thing. He probably said maybe people are a little open more now to talk about it, but back at that time, that's just the way those interactions worked. But after I had been working there full time for probably about 15 years at that point, or no, actually it was more like 11 years at that point. We were talking about making a transition. My father was pulling back more, and not in the office as much, and I was responsible for doing a lot more things running the business. And it was at that time I told him, you're really not in here in front of everybody all the time here. This is probably the time where you should elevate me to be president at that point. Great. To take care of running things, so that was the time frame that we did that.
I think that's a great thing that you mentioned, because especially, and I believe this to be true from the entrepreneurs, especially the older generation entrepreneurs that I've known, is that power isn't given, and power needs to be taken. And I think a lot of times people wait till they get some kind of power. But in all reality, if people give you power, they have the ability to take it away. And I think most strong entrepreneurs that build businesses, they know they have to transition. Your dad knew that they were going to have to transition. But I think it was probably very rewarding for him to know that you came up to him and said, it's time. It's time to make this change. We're going to make this change. And I think that's when the level of respect goes up, especially with the older generations. Your dad worked hard to build a business, and I don't care if it's his son or not, his son or his daughter. He doesn't want to just, turn it over to someone. Maybe it goes all to hell. He wants to make sure that whoever takes over can actually run the business and make it successful for all the employees that are part of his family as well. And I think it's important for that next generation. When they're ready, they need to tell the parent, it's time for me to take over.
Well, the truth is, especially in a transition like that it's not one person running the show. It really has to work between two people, and to understand how they want to do things and work together on it.
When you took over from your dad, so now your dad's out of the business. He's probably coming in to see people, shake things up every once in a while. But did you ever have a time, after your dad was out of the business, that you maybe had second thoughts, like, what was this really what I wanted to do? And then how did you get through that? Maybe you did.
I can't say that I really did. You may always have like those days where you're going to have a bad day, and you wonder about it. But knowing and wanting to move to that, I really didn't think of any other place that I wanted to be or wanted to work. This was where I wanted to be. It felt right for me. I had the right team of people, and it was it was really something that I wanted to focus on and bring further along with the great group of people that we had here.
Was there anything?
So that was kind of a driving motivation for me to keep going through. When you were going through more difficult times or challenges, because those are always going to happen.
Sure. Well, it's a journey for sure.
Yes.
I think I told you at your anniversary party. a 50-year anniversary is a fantastic milestone, but there's so many stepping stones along the way, and some you slip on, some you have struggle getting up on, but eventually you get across all those stones to the great milestones of 50 years in your case. But Chris, I got to tell you, when you're taking over, your dad's still around, but he's kind of out of the picture. There had to be a time where you decided we're going to make a fundamental change that could be drastic for the business. Did you ever experience a time when you had to make that type of a decision when your dad was kind of out of it, but he still had his ear on it? He was still mentoring you, obviously, where you had a conflict with the change.
Yeah, we did. I think it was probably shortly after we were changing that, and we said, you know what, it's time for us to move facilities and upgrade and modernize to things. We were in a building that my dad had for 18 years. We had to rent some extra warehouse space because we were outgrowing it at that point, and it was time to make a move. And fortunately for him, he owned the building, and we said, hey, maybe this is time to make a change. Maybe we go find the right facility and rent, so we have flexibility, and you can make the decision of either renting this to someone else and sell the building. But I told him flat out, I said, one thing I want to make clear, since you're not around here that often, is that if you'd like to lease the building, have a tenant here, I'm not going to be handling that. Find your own management company. So he decided the best thing was to put it on the market and just sell the building.
Did he give you pushback in the beginning, like, why don't you stay here? This building served us for 18 years. What do you mean you got to change? I mean, was there any of those conversations?
And I think in anything there was always, there's always some sentimental things when you make changes like that. It's difficult, but I think he understood a lot of the reasons from where we were. I told him that we could find a building that's just close enough in distance, so it won't be anything of having to travel much further to where we are. We're not going to move like an hour away from where we are now or anything like that. There's plenty of options.
We're seeing a lot of changes
within a 5-mile radius of where we are.
We're seeing a lot of changes in this space today. A lot of the second generation, or sometimes the third generation, they're starting to look at these facilities where these dealerships have been around since the 70s or 80s. Okay, it's time we got to make some changes. And I know those are tough decisions because you're planning for the future, and what is that new facility going to look like, or how is that going to accommodate the future, if you will. Chris, let me ask you one final question.
And they cost money too.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing.
Like that, there's a financial investment too. Yeah. So it's like any type of investment that you make in the business, you want to make sure that you're going to get the return on it that you expect. And even though nothing's a guarantee, or you see things that far out, you do have to take risks in doing that.
Well, so you have to take risks. And they have to be your risk.
None of these companies in our industry grew risk-free.
No.
I think they'd all agree on that statement.
Well, I think that we take risk. Most people take risk. They're not afraid of risk. I think what we fear the most in our industry is the fear of conflict, and it's very dysfunctional. I mean, I think there's a way that we have to be able to conflict. We have to be able to make challenges. We can't just assume things are as they were said. We should be able to argue things, and our industry really, really struggles with that. And I'm hoping as we start to see, there's a lot of generational shifts in the way companies are, managers, all kinds of things going on right now with 5 generations in the workplace for first time in history. But I really hope that our industry can get past this fear of conflict, because I really think they need to have that. Is there any advice that
conflict is difficult.
It's always difficult.
And there's always going to be some fear. But healthy conflict is good. It's good to have different opinions and to have an open mind. And I think when you're looking within a business, when you have family businesses in conflict, I think it's an important thing to set boundaries and know where they are and that they're crossed. And when they're being crossed by either person, to point it out and say that that's it. But the fear in the beginning is always the most difficult. But once you get past that fear and work it, and you've established some ground rules that you work with, and you both stick to them, then yeah, there's still going to be differing of opinions and some conflict there. But if you've got a belief on your side of why it's really good, then you have the opportunity of telling somebody why the change is worth it, and if they can give it a try. And a lot of productive conversations and strategic decisions come out of that between both parties.
Absolutely.
Because the thing in the end is that when you're going to move forward and you're working with a transition with two people, like I said before, it's got to work with two people agreeing together. If one person's in agreement and the other is not, in the long term, those decisions are doomed.
No,
because
right.
You're always going to have one person on one side that really wasn't on board with it, and they're probably going to spend more time pointing out the faults of everything as opposed to the positive parts of everything.
Well, you have to be. You could see the commitment as you go along, and if you hold back and are afraid to have the conversation, you're not going to recognize the commitment. And sometimes you might go along and realize, holy crap, this was not a good idea for either one of us.
Listen, you can make mistakes, but the good thing is there are a lot of times you can make mistakes, and if it was the wrong decision, you can go back and go in another direction, because now you probably know the right decision, that you can go there. Now, I mean, sometimes you have mistakes that cost money. If you have a mistake that costs you $1 million, you really don't want to do that. But so you can't dwell on those things. You got to move on and correct it and use it as a learning experience.
Well, it's all back to risk. Risk and reward. And sometimes the reward doesn't happen. Sometimes it's a cost. So, Chris, is there anything that you would share? What would you share with the younger generation in the helm right now, getting ready to take over from either mom or dad? What's the one piece of advice you'd give them?
I'd say the one piece of advice I would give them is to be clear on what you want and be able to communicate that. And don't be afraid or discouraged if you get resistance or disagreement on it. Be open to hear what the other person has to say, and see if you need to make some adjustments yourself, or look at your expectations again. Or it may be time to stand up for yourself a little bit more, and be more convincing of why your proposal of how you want to do something is the right one.
I think that's great advice. And Chris, it was so awesome to spend time with you and your family in New Jersey. I know it was a great celebration, and everybody watching us knows this for sure, Chris. Status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented. Don't get stuck in status quo, and we'll see you all tomorrow.